so people would tell the reporters later, he began to act very strange, and she would allow no one to criticize him or discipline him. And it was basically, their family life was Stewart at the center, his mom waiting on him at his feet, and poor dad pushed to the periphery of the family circle. Then, after they moved to Los Angeles in about 1924, it began to become horribly apparent that this young man was not terribly your average red-blooded all Canadian-American young man of the 1920s who was content to take part in the prosperity of the Roaring Twenties and sip some bootleg gin on the side. It was apparent that Stewart was interested only in underage boys. They were his exclusive focus of interest. And he befriended especially a young boy from the neighborhood who was nicknamed Philly Scott. And apparently, Philly's family began to realize that this was more than just a older boy, younger boy friendship, and they sicked the police on Stewart, and he was arrested on a statutory charge. The sources vary, but the charge was either dropped or he was let off with probation. And apparently Stewart vowed that all his life he'd realized that he could get away with anything, and he was determined to have his way and that this would never happen again. So he asked his dad to go out to Riverside County near what was then called Wineville and to purchase about a little more than an acre of farmland out there where he was going to establish a chicken ranch. And his dad, always the obedient father, went and did so. But Stewart needed a helper. He couldn't run the ranch on his own. And along with his leanings toward pedophilia, he was apparently also, it's clear, what doctors would call a sadist. He needed someone who could give him the kind of service that his mother gave him, but unlike loving mom, he wanted someone whom he could terrorize, whom he could feel superior to. So he went back up to Saskatchewan, to the town of Saskatoon, and he visited his sister Winifred and her husband, and he encouraged their 13-year-old son, Sanford, Stewart's nephew, and George and Louise's grandson, to come with him on a visit to Regina in Saskatchewan. He'd never been, he thought that sounded fun. And so the family let him go. But then suddenly Sanford realized, hey, wait a minute, we're not going to Regina. And Stewart basically told him, no, we're going back to California, shut up. So he took the boy illegally back here to his chicken ranch, to his homestead, near what was then Wineville. And Sanford and Stewart's dad and Stewart built the small chicken ranch, the main house of which, though it's slightly renovated and expanded, still stands. I was there yesterday, and though I didn't see any ghosts, I could well imagine the ghosts of the past. I could well picture the scenes from the past playing out there in my mind. It seemed very familiar to me after all those years of looking at pictures and reading documents. But unfortunately for the makers of those ghost hunter shows on cable TV, I didn't see any ghosts, and we weren't attacked by any rampaging poltergeists or anything. Well, actually, a window opened, and then a whole mess of flying dishes came out of the window at us. Yes, and okay, we heard ghostly moaning, but no, I'm just joking. But anyway, Sanford, once the chicken ranch was built, Northcott kept his poor nephew there for over 2 years, a veritable prisoner. He didn't want him to associate with anybody. He made him get up early, and only after he would serve him, Stewart, breakfast in bed, would Stewart deign to get up himself. Whenever the urge was upon him, he would sexually abuse the boy. He would regularly beat him with a stick, with a belt, with a lathe, with with his fists, would pour boiling hot water over him, would shove him against a window, creating a big scar on his forehead. He constantly told him that if he ever disobeyed him or ever said anything, he would kill him any minute. But meanwhile, Stewart's need to dominate and to sate his lusts were not finished. He would regularly go and prowl the streets of Southern California, going as far afield as Los Angeles, where his parents still lived, looking for boys. On at least about 20 occasions, he would bring a young child back to the ranch and would tell Sanford, wait out here, going into the house. He carried the little boy inside. Then a short time later, they'd reemerge and he'd take the boy back home. But on 3 occasions, that was not all. At the beginning of February, 80 years ago this year, Stewart apparently got into an argument with a Mexican teenager, a young man in his late teens or early 20s, whose name was never determined, although some people thought it might have been a young Mexican lad who worked in the laundry of the Los Angeles County General Hospital, where Stewart's mom also worked, but no one was ever able to find out who he was for sure. Stewart and he got into an argument, and Stewart shot him, and then, and actually this probably happened in his parents' house on Britannia Street in Los Angeles, so it remains one of the great mysteries of the case, but at least Stewart's mom, possibly his dad, might have seen Stewart shoot another human being to death, but we'll never know. Anyway, Stewart dumped the naked, headless body of this person who was forever known as the Headless Mexican on the highway on the road leading to Puente, and he took the head back to his ranch in a bucket where he promptly burnt and crushed it and then scattered the ashes in the desert. And then in the succeeding months, he brought young Walter Collins, whom he might have known from when he lived in Los Angeles, to the ranch. Walter stayed at the ranch for over a week, and then Stewart's mom said, Stewart, you can't let this boy live. He knows too much. He said, okay, Mom, I'll shoot him. Maybe he added, just like I did that angry Mexican boy. But she said, no, that causes too much noise. The neighbors will hear. Axe is quieter. So, and then Louise told both her nephew Sanford and her son Stewart, we must each strike a blow so that if we're ever caught, we will share equally in the guilt. And they all did. Sanford, of course, did not want to do so, but he was so frightened of Stewart that he agreed. And it was his mother, by her own admission, who struck the death blow. And then 2 months later, in May of 1928, 2 young boys, 10 and 12, named Lewis and Nelson Winslow, were kidnapped by Stewart from Los Angeles, brought to the ranch, and over a week later, Stewart made Sanford hit them in the head with an axe, then he hit them as well, and then he made Sanford consign them to the earth while they were still alive, and Sanford, in his testimony, said he just covered them up enough so that he would shut out their awful combination of a groan and a gasp that they were making. One of probably the most nightmarish moment of this trial, of this event rather. And then, but fortunately, by the end of the summer, Sanford's sister, Jessie Clark, his older sister, came to visit from Canada. Stewart had been having Sanford send phony letters back to Saskatoon saying, I'm having a great time here in Wineville. I've got lots of friends going to school, everything's hunky-dory. But as it turned out, they did not believe that that was the case, so they sent Jessie to investigate. Sanford quickly told Jessie what was going on. Jessie tried to help him escape, and George, the father, who by now had just had enough, agreed to help him escape. But Stewart went mad, grabbed a gun, threatened to kill his own father, Jessie, Sanford, everyone. And so much his father was so afraid that he got a gun himself, afraid of his own